All right, today we're tackling a story that's just a massive economic whiplash. We're talking about Bengal. How did a region that was, believe it or not, one of the wealthiest places on the entire planet have its fortunes just completely flipped on their head in the first 100 years of British rule? Seriously, let's get right into it. So, yeah, that's the big question, right? The one we're really trying to unpack here. How on earth does a place famous for its riches, its incredible craftsmanship, become a land of famines? I mean, this is a puzzle that historians, economists, they've been wrestling with this for ages. And today, we're going to break down exactly how it all went down. Okay, just look at this. It's the perfect before and after shot, economically speaking. You've got the mid 1700s on one side. Bengal is a powerhouse. It's a hub of manufacturing, sending out these beautiful cotton and silk textiles. And what's coming in? Gold, silver, bullion. Fast forward just 100 years, and the whole thing is upside down. The script is totally flipped. Now Bengal's job is to supply raw materials, and it's become a market for stuff made in Britain. The wealth isn't flowing in anymore, it's gushing out. So how did this happen? You got to understand this wasn't some kind of accident or a natural economic shift. No way. This was the result of very specific, very deliberate policies. So let's peel back the first layer and look at the key mechanisms that kicked off this whole decline. Okay, the first big idea you need to get is this thing called the drainage of wealth. Thinkers like Dadabhai Naorji and R.C. Dutt came up with this, and it's pretty simple, really. Picture a giant one-way pipeline. All the money, all the profits that the East India Company and its people were making in Bengal, well, it wasn't being put back into Bengal's economy. Nope. It was getting siphoned straight back to Great Britain. It was literally bleeding the local economy dry. And listen to how the historian R.C. Dutt put it. I mean, this guy studied this stuff inside and out, and he did not pull any punches. He basically said that this constant drain of wealth was so massive, so relentless, that it could take the most prosperous country in the world and bring it to its knees. His words, it would reduce it to a land of famines. Chilling stuff. You know, even Karl Marx saw this from a different perspective. He made this really direct connection. He said that the treasures being pulled out of Bengal weren't just making a few people rich. No, this was the seed money. This wealth was being turned into capital, the very capital that was fueling the Industrial Revolution back in Britain. And think about the timing. It's really no coincidence that the Industrial Revolution kicks into high gear right after the British get control of Bengal. The two are totally linked. Okay, on to the second major piece of the puzzle. It's a land policy from 1793 called the Permanent Settlement. Now, on the surface, it sounds kind of reasonable. The idea was to fix the amount of tax the government would collect from the big landlords, the zamindars, forever. Create some stability. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. While the government's take was fixed, there was absolutely no limit on how much rent the zamindars could squeeze out of the actual farmers, the people working the land. And the results? Well, they were just disastrous. For the farmers, the prajas, it was a disaster. It meant crushing debt and poverty. For the landlords, why would they bother investing in making the land more productive? There was no real incentive. But here's the real kicker. This policy made owning land look like the safest, most certain investment you could make. So if you were a wealthy local with some capital, instead of risking it on a new business or an innovative industry, you just poured it into buying up more land rights. It basically starved local industry of investment. Okay, so let's just pause for a second. You've got wealth being drained out of the country, and you've got local money being diverted away from industry and into land. But that's not even the whole story. The next step was, well, it was a direct attack on Bengal's amazing, world-renowned industries. The goal? To transform it from the workshop of the world into a captive market. And this table, wow, it says it all, doesn't it? Just look at the numbers. Let's say you're bringing British silk into India. You pay a tiny 3.5% duty. Okay, but now you're a Bengali merchant and you want to sell your silk in Britain. Bam! A 20% tariff. And it gets worse. For wool, it's 2% versus 30%. This is the opposite of free trade. This is a system that is rigged, plain and simple, to crush the competition. But what's the human cost in all this? Let's just walk through what happens to a typical artisan, a weaver. First, those crazy high tariffs slam the door shut on their main export market in Europe. Okay, fine. But then their own local market gets flooded with cheaper, machine-made stuff from Britain. So that weaver, who probably also did a bit of farming to get by, loses that crucial second stream of income. And this happens to millions of people.
All of a sudden, they have nothing to fall back on but farming, which leads to massive underemployment in the villages for huge chunks of the year.
So, as the old economy is being taken apart piece by piece, a new one is being built. But you have to understand, the blueprint for this new economy, it wasn't designed to help Bengal. Not at all. It was designed from the ground up to serve the British Empire. Let's take a look at how they did it. And this all happened incredibly fast. Check out the timeline. 1833, a new act opens the door for Europeans to own land, which kicks off the whole plantation economy. Just 2 years later, they get rid of all the internal customs duties. Why? To create one single massive market that's just perfect for flooding with British products. And then, by the 1850s, you get the railways. But these railways weren't built to connect Indian communities. Their main purpose was to get raw materials like cotton out of the heartland to the ports and to push finished British goods in. So sure, new industries did pop up. We're talking jute, coal, tea plantations, but every single one of them was built to fit this new colonial model. And who controlled them? Not Bengalis. They were almost completely dominated by something called the British Managing Agency House. It was basically a corporate structure that guaranteed that all the power, and more importantly, all the profits, stayed in British hands. So you might be thinking, what about the locals? Didn't any Bengali entrepreneurs try to fight back to compete in this new system? The answer is yes, absolutely. And their stories are fascinating because they show so much promise and ultimately so much heartbreak. I mean, take a look at this one man, Dwarkanath Tagore. His story is just incredible. This guy wasn't your average merchant. He was a visionary, a modern industrialist in every sense of the word. His portfolio was insane. Indigo, sugar, coal mines, banking, insurance, even his own international shipping line. He even tried to create a genuine partnership with the British through his company. His vision was clear, an industrialized India standing shoulder to shoulder with the rest of the world. But, and here's the tragic turn, it didn't work. His massive industrial empire collapsed, and his story really becomes a symbol for this whole era. It shows that even if you had the vision, even if you had the money and the connections, the system itself, the colonial economic structure, was just stacked too high against you. The obstacles were just too great. And, there was another, more subtle impact, a cultural one. The new education system that the British brought in, well, it started to change what people valued. It created a new middle class that saw a safe, secure government job, desk work, as the ultimate goal. Taking a risk on a new business, dirtying your hands with enterprise, that started to be looked down upon. It basically discouraged the very spirit of entrepreneurship that had made Bengal a powerhouse in the first place. And that really brings us to the final takeaway here. Because this isn't just something that happened in a history book. Think about it. These economic patterns that were set up 2 centuries ago, a system based on exporting raw materials, a weakened industrial base, a dependency on foreign markets, those things don't just vanish overnight when a country gets its independence. So the big question I want to leave you with is this. How do these deep, historical, economic structures continue to influence the economies, the challenges, and the opportunities for nations all across the globe, even today?